Hey, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of Our Love Story with our licensed couples counselor, Dyanna Eisel.
Hi,
Yay!
How are you?
I feel like I need an applause button, and the crowd goes wild.
So excited to be here.
Yes, me too. I love this time of the month, and I think that it's very, very beneficial for our audience members and our followers. And not only do I think that, but I know that, Dyanna, because I get the feedback. Do you?
I love that. Yes, I love seeing in the comments when people are reflecting on themselves in some of these conversations that we have. Anything that we can do that leads to greater conversations in people's relationships, I just think is overall a really positive thing.
Yeah, I totally agree. So today, well, let me just back up. If you are just joining us, oftentimes we'll choose a topic, something that's trending. Maybe it's something that Dyanna has seen in her office over and over, or, something that is on the table. Like, we got to talk about this. This is something a lot of people are talking about. Or sometimes we will choose a post, an anonymous post, most likely. If it's not anonymous, we block out the name. We don't want to put anyone on blast, but we choose a post in the MOMnation Arizona group to react to reflect on, to offer advice on. And today is one of those days. And when you sent over this post for me to, take a peek at before the show, I was actually really glad that you did, because I saw this post and I had some questions as well. And we always say, gee, I wish I had more facts about XYZ, right? And I think this is probably one of those cases too. But we'll bring it up. We'll talk it through, because this is one of those, I think, very trending topics as well, in terms of, potential divorce, potential separation, which is a big topic of conversation. And then the whole social media piece is obviously very relevant right now. So I'll bring it up, read it to those that are on the podcast platform and just listening by ear. This post came out on March 21st, so it's pretty fresh. And it says, I think my husband and I are on the verge of divorce. He caught me looking at his phone last night. I felt he's been acting off for the past few weeks. When I looked, he had locked his internet browser and Facebook Messenger, so they require Face ID. I looked through his Facebook briefly, and he recently joined a group called Friends with Benefits. I saw one post he had commented hello on of a woman taking a selfie. He was furious at me and blew up saying he can't do this anymore and that we are done. I asked him why he Face ID protected these apps. He said something along the lines of being allowed to have his own privacy. I didn't cry, surprisingly. I just want answers. We have an 8-year-old son together. My husband makes 3 times what I do. So I'm just not sure where to go from here. I don't want a divorce, and I want to try and talk things out, but it's so hard to get him to communicate. I just don't know. I don't really have any friends that I can talk to, and I just feel really alone. Poor thing.
Oh, that's tough.
That is tough.
That's tough. Yeah, well, I think there's a couple of different aspects here of this conversation. One, it says at the very end, like, it's hard to communicate with him. Like, well, I think it's fair that communication in the relationship, it needs some love, right? Because for whatever reason, like, this mom's spidey senses were tingling, right? She says, like, things felt off, right? And so the fact that she pursued, like, looking through the phone instead of, like, talking to him directly tells me that there perhaps isn't a whole lot of emotional safety in the relationship to begin with. If you don't feel comfortable just approaching your partner and being like, hey,
what's up?
It feels off. Like, I'm feeling disconnected. I feel like we've been distant or something, to try to get to, like, the root of whatever it is, instead of, like, going on our own, being super spy, looking through devices, which we know rarely ends well. So I feel like there's already setting a precedence there that, like, the emotional safety and communication in the relationship is damaged at the very least. Then there's the aspect of, looking through the phone, right? Which, sure, it is a breach of privacy. One could argue, like, I felt like I had a good reason. I felt justified. I felt like there was something going on. Sure, but at the end of the day, like someone's privacy is still being violated, which is going to lead to a breach of trust, which of course is going to lead to an attachment injury in the relationship anytime that trust is broken. So there's that second element too. The third element that comes up for me is, have we talked about boundaries and expectations with social media? Has that conversation in the relationship about like what types of groups are okay to be a part of, what types of interactions with strangers is okay to be a part of, what are the rules of engagement here and boundaries that we've set on social media? If there aren't any, then we need to talk about like, what does that look like for you and what are your expectations? Because I could see on the receiving end of that, like in his position, like this is so multi-layered, right? Like you went through my phone, so that's a breach of privacy. We never set any expectations on social media, what we're supposed to be doing or not supposed to be doing. I don't know. I don't know what the conversations have been like before that, but I can certainly see both sides of this, right? So the social media part is a big part too. The fourth and final element for me out of this post is the financial part. So we're no longer talking about, hey, like we need to like figure this out. We need to go to counseling. We need to figure out what our boundaries are. We need to have more open communication, but he makes 3 times what she does. And so how is that going to overall impact the dynamic of the relationship, of any relationship? If you know that if you're feeling violated or you're feeling like, you know, we're just not compatible anymore, whatever reason that people have to get separated, are you going to be able to support yourself if you do separate? And if you can't, are you perhaps staying in situations or relationships longer than maybe you should? And the other person knows that, you know what I mean? And so then what sort of power dynamic is that creating in a relationship, knowing that kind of in a way, no matter what, I'm in it for the long haul because I can't support myself financially. You know what I mean? So those are like the four, big ticket items that come out of this post for me.
Yeah, I agree with all of that. Let's start at the first one, and that is the looking at the phone. Now, is it always a red flag if somebody gets upset about that? I kind of feel like not, because and I don't want to say there is or isn't something going on in this particular situation, but that is a violation and that could emotionally disrupt somebody, even if there's not something going on, you know?
Absolutely. If there hasn't been a clear expectation or precedent set that like you can pick up my phone at any time and go through it, like if that's never been expressly said, then like probably shouldn't be doing it, right? Because we are all entitled to our privacy, and phones and devices aren't just used for communication on social media. It's also used for like work emails. It's also used for journaling for a lot of people, using the notes app to journal. Like that's almost like in some cases, like going in your room and opening someone's diary or journal. Like we wouldn't do that, right? Like that would be a breach of privacy. And so our devices hold so much more than just the ability to communicate with other people. So going through someone's personal affects to make yourself feel better or more secure in a relationship is a big red flag.
Yeah. And I think it's harder, and, you know, correct me if I'm wrong, or if you have additional feedback to this. I think it's harder to have that conversation of, hey, I went through your phone and blah, 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 versus I'm feeling like things are kind of off. I feel like we've been a bit distant lately. Like, am I just crazy, or like what's going on for you? I feel like those are kind of 2 different approaches, right?
Absolutely. Well, one is avoidance, you know, avoidant to just like go through the device yourself and see what you can find. And frankly, it does not make you feel better, even if you find nothing, because your brain, there's a little voice back here sometimes that's like, well, I just didn't find anything this time, or they deleted it, or I'm not looking in the right place, or whatever. So it's very avoidant to just go off on your own accord and try to dig through someone's device trying to find something, rather than having the really uncomfortable confrontational conversation, which again leads me to the first point of like, where's the emotional safety in this relationship if you can't have that conversation?
Yeah, that makes sense. The second thing that struck me about what you said is having a discussion about the boundaries. Like, how do we handle this whole huge social media thing, right? And all these different platforms and all these different ways of communicating. Whereas back in our day, I feel like those conversations, if they were had, were like, okay, when we're out partying or when we're out doing XYZ, like more physical kind of circumstances versus all this virtual stuff that we're dealing with now.
Right.
And I feel like, so it's like that conversation obviously becomes bigger, it's broader, right? There's more things to cover.
Absolutely. You can have an indiscretion laying in bed next to your significant other on the phone or on a device. You know what I mean? Whereas in the past, it was pretty much boiled down to, as you said, like our behaviors out in public, like in mixed company with other people, pornography, and like essentially like strip clubs. You know what I mean? It was kind of boiled down to those three things. Like, these are three things that could be considered indiscretions in our relationship. And like, these are my expectations for it. You know what I mean? If it was communicated. But it's so much more complex. It's so much more secretive. And it's so much easier now to engage in an emotional affair with someone online.
Oh, yeah. So much easier. It reminds me of an episode that we did probably a couple years back now, maybe last year, when we talked about the conversation that many couples don't have that really they should have before they decide to tie the knot and do the whole thing.
Absolutely. Absolutely. There are things that sometimes we don't think about until they're a problem. Yeah. And then by that point, it's probably a big problem.
Yeah, because there's emotions and there's humanness in there, right?
And there's been someone potentially violated and the other person didn't know that what they were doing was a violation. And so now trust has been broken.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm going to put that, just so y'all know, the link in the show notes for that particular episode is there. So if you want to check that out, it was a really great conversation about the different things to discuss before you decide to move forward in your relationship and make things a bit more formal. It was a great one, and definitely think that this whole social media behavior, which I think is probably even in there, or some sort of touching on it's in some way, somehow, I don't remember exactly. But if not, then I would definitely add this to the mix because I think it's super important as well.
Yeah, definitely.
So another thing that I see a lot of, and I believe you do too, especially this day and age with housing prices where they're at, rent prices where they're at, I do see a lot of conversation about, I just can't afford to live on my own.
Mm-hmm.
And like you mentioned, this is causing people to potentially stay in relationships that they should maybe no longer be in for that reason. And that's got to be a bit taxing on mental health and a bit stressful.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, anyone that has to feel like they have to stay in a situation that's potentially abusive or at the very least damaging to themselves longer than they should because of money, right, isn't going to really foster or create this environment of equality in the relationship and love and respect. And it's going to potentially cause major resentment on one or both parts. You know what I mean? And it's going to affect the overall roles and responsibilities dynamic in the relationship. You know, when a stay-at-home mom, I mean, stay-at-home dads can do it too, but like for the sake of this discussion, a stay-at-home mom or a mom who's working only part-time or is making less, like this poster, is not put up in a position to support herself potentially if they do separate, because so much of a stay-at-home mom's job is unpaid. I mean, it's all unpaid, right? But you're contributing to the household no matter what. You're providing for the kids, you're providing for the family, providing for the partner, like all of those things, though, they're not paid positions, right? But we do them anyway. And so how can we open up this greater conversation in the relationship, not only for this mom, but like in general, if you're finding yourself in a stay-at-home mom position, working part-time, making significantly less than your partner, how can we open up the possibility of like alternatives of making sure that safety and security is not an issue in the relationship, with the explicit expectation that if something happens to our relationship, I'm still going to be okay and you're still going to be okay. You know what I mean? Nobody goes into a marriage or a committed relationship with the plan of splitting up. Like it just doesn't happen, right? But we know it happens about 50% of the time that people do end up separating or getting divorced. So what happens if you don't have that plan and you're unable to support yourself? Do you think that your current partner would want that for you? Do you think that before you get too deep into this relationship that they would want that for you, that they would want you to struggle and not be able to just basically support yourself? You know what I mean? Sure, there's child support if you divorce, right? What if your kids are over 18? What if they're 17 and you only have like a year, right? What if you get alimony? Cool. But what if you don't?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Do you think that your partner would be okay with that? So how can we have an open, honest conversation about how can I feel more secure knowing that we're not planning to get a divorce, but something there that gives me the security in knowing that when I'm in this relationship and I'm looking to repair things, or we're going to counseling or doing whatever, that I'm doing it for the right reasons. I'm doing it because I want this to work. I want us to work. I want to stay together. I want to grow old with you. You know what I mean? Not because, shoot, if we separate, I can't afford to live by myself. I can't afford to support myself. I can't support my kids by myself. You know, any of those things. So like, if your why is different for making a relationship work based on money, how can we have an uncomfortable conversation about money to set both partners up for that safety and security, knowing that they're both going to be okay if the relationship isn't?
Right. And I feel like this isn't the time to have that conversation. Back then was the time to have that conversation.
For sure.
Right? Because we don't want to be having this conversation when there's tension.
It's probably not going to go over very well.
Probably not going to win.
Excuse me. No, probably not.
Great point there. Because again, I see it a lot, and I think that it is a huge conversation right now.
Absolutely.
Do you have any suggestions? And this is my last question. Do you have any suggestions on how this mom could approach the situation again? I mean, she shares she doesn't want to get a divorce. They have a child together, which sounds like, you know, she's highly considering. Things got a little, I mean, we weren't there obviously, but it sounds like things got a little, you know, out of the window, a little out of hand.
Yeah.
How can we bring it back down and approach this situation with a solution-oriented mindset?
Sure. You know, clearly it feels like we have a communication issue in our relationship, and clearly trust has been broken. Your trust, my trust. We're kind of in a tough spot right now, and it just really highlights that we're unable to communicate about our feelings, or when we're feeling like something's up and our spidey senses are tingling, or however you want to word it. You know what I mean? So clearly there's something missing in our relationship. This isn't a me thing or a you thing. Like, this is an us thing. Yeah. So I really want to, if we can't do it ourselves and have that open conversation, like, can we go to couples counseling and have somebody objective help us walk through, you know, what our conflict themes are, why we don't feel the emotional safety that we want to in the relationship, what's holding us back from being honest with each other. Just really coming to the table with like a solution focus, like, this is us together working on this. This isn't me against you, or vice versa. To figure this out together, because I do want to make this work, but clearly there's some things that either we're not aware of, or we're aware of and we're not talking about, that are preventing us from having the type of relationship that we want.
Yeah. Makes sense. That's awesome. Thank you for that. I know that, well, I don't know, but I'm sure that will be very helpful for this mom when she has a chance to watch this. Anything else that you would like to add before we?
Well, I feel like this could be a whole episode by itself, right? But when you're having the money conversation, you know, with a new partner, you can also link this back to that podcast episode that you're putting in the comments there, right? but this is something that I do see frequently. People who are stay-at-home parents or making significantly less income than their partner and feeling like they have to do things or accommodate things in the relationship, not again because they want to, but because they're afraid they're not going to be able to support themselves. So, an idea that has, recently come to light and something that I'm seeing a little bit more of is asking the partner who's making more money to contribute to like a 401k for their partner. And so if they're together forever, then like, great. When they retire, they can go on a fantastic vacation and, have this money set aside or whatever. But in the unfortunate event that the relationship ends, both partners know that they're both going to be okay. So it isn't planning for the worst. It's not planning to separate. It's planning to make sure that we're always focused on the relationship for the right reasons.
Yeah.
And that no matter what happens, we're both going to be okay.
I love that. So you're still doing your consultations for couples?
Absolutely.
How can they connect?
You can go to my website, DyannaEiselTherapy.com. There's a button in the top right corner where you can schedule a free 15-minute phone consultation.
Love that. Thank you so much for helping out our audience, our mamas, our followers, all the things. It's very helpful. And I know that they appreciate it. So thank you. And thank you for being here again.
Thank you for having me.
Of course. I think this is year 3 or something. I don't know. I always say that and I always seem very confused as to how long we've been doing it. But that's because the days just kind of merge into the next day. And wait, is it already April? How'd that happen? I don't know.
I have no idea.
All right, guys, if you want to check out any of our previous episodes, hop on over to our YouTube channel. It is at MOMnation USA. That's our handle. Scroll down just a little bit and you will see the playlist for our love story. There you can check out this episode. You can check out all of our past episodes. They are all there for you. If you prefer to listen to the audio version, maybe you run a lot, hike a lot, bike a lot, all the things, then hop on over to your favorite podcast platform. Do a quick search for MOMnation Talk Radio. There you'll find us, like, notify, download, feedback. No, review, not feedback. I think kind of the same thing. Review us. We really, really appreciate that. And we will see you next time. All righty, Dyanna.
Bye.